So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session of the IMC World Forum hosted by the European Association of Conservatoires and entitled Rehearsing for Change: How Conservatoires Globally Seek to Prepare Musicians for Their Visions of Tomorrow. Shortly, we shall have two presentations which offer us contrasted pictures of how a conservatoire in Western Europe and one in China are seeking to reconcile past and future in order to provide the most relevant training as they see it for their students in the musical worlds of today and tomorrow. But to begin with, here are some more general thoughts on the subject of change and of the mouvement perpétuel, those oscillations between past obligations and allegiances and future aspirations and challenges that preoccupy those of us who work in and for the conservatoire world. Past, present, and future all play their part in the culture of conservatoires. Even though the idea of conservation in their title refers not to there being museums of musical culture, but to their original role as foundling hospitals in Italy, the Conservatoire's mission has always included an element of handing down knowledge and expertise, and of ensuring that traditions are not lost. At certain times, they have been preoccupied with addressing real and urgent needs for trained musicians. The origins of the Paris Conservatoire, in many ways the model for the great music training institutions of the 19th and early 20th centuries, lay primarily in the sudden demand for huge numbers of instrumentalists generated by the répertoire civique of the colossal open-air festivals in post-revolutionary France. And through their providing a natural working environment for generations of composers and innovators in the technical aspects of performance, to say nothing of eager and ambitious young musicians determined to carve out a new and distinctive path for themselves, they have been natural breeding grounds for developments at music's cutting edge. But what of the situation in present-day conservatoires? In particular, when we try to take the temperature of conservatoires globally in relation to their aspirations for the future of music and for their students' success within their careers, what, if any, are the common features? And, just as significantly, what are the differences in terms of how this future is viewed from different global perspectives? We live in interesting times. Our future seems to be under threat from all sides, whether in the form of global economic downturn, political and ideological unrest, or environmental catastrophe. Such weighty issues can sometimes make debates about the future of conservatoire training seem trivial by comparison. And yet, the very seriousness of the challenges makes it all the more important that in every sphere of activity we look closely at what we do, why we do it, what is its true value, and, with this in mind, how might we do it better and with a more compelling relevance? Conservatoire training is no exception to this imperative. For conservatoire training, these questions of purpose and method take on a number of dimensions. Whilst the principal reason we train musicians in conservatoires must always be to equip them as well as possible for the harsh realities of a profession that they are generally firmly committed to even before they start their higher studies, we should also respect their dreams, their ambitions, and the burning energy that in special cases will make them movers and shakers of the status quo within the artistic future they are about to enter. For society at large, and perhaps I'm speaking from a European perspective here, the value of the practice at the highest level of the art of serious classical music is comparatively low. But as specialist communities of learners and teachers who value it particularly highly, we have an obligation of advocacy, alongside our own need to search for a wider relevance for our art form in society's terms. And although the pattern of training that has evolved in conservatoires over some 2 centuries seems generally well adapted to the requirements of producing highly proficient practitioners of Western European classical music, this does not mean that it's the only viable model, nor that those requirements necessarily remain constant. Moreover, where other genres and styles are introduced into the curricula of conservatoires, it does not necessarily follow that they will best be taught using the same model. We know that it is facile to link the numbers of music students being trained in conservatoires too literally to the work opportunities that await them in the profession. But when orchestras are facing funding cuts that threaten their viability, is it right to go on training musicians in the same numbers as before? And if one solution is to train our present and future students differently, giving them skills to create work opportunities where traditional employment patterns are vanishing, are these skills less, more, or equally important than the traditional criteria of musical excellence when we come to selecting students at entry or to determining the grades with which they ultimately graduate? In Europe, and especially in the countries situated to the northwest of the region, these questions are prompting major changes in conservatoires, from what is taught and by whom, to what kinds of sectors of the music profession are envisaged as typical destinations for graduates. Many institutions with august traditions built on fine but narrow concepts of musical excellence are feeling the pressure to adopt a more broad and diverse view of their training and of the talents they are looking for in the students passing through it. In these environments, change feels as if it is happening more rapidly than ever, and in ways which threaten to erode the old hierarchies among conservatoires. Conversely, regional institutions less burdened by the weight of their own histories, and newly established institutions whose very raison d'être is to be found in current musical trends, can often see opportunities, as well as threats of their own, in this ever more rapidly changing scenario. The picture in North America is echoes in some respects that in Europe, where, for example, the Juilliard School's courageous, in my view, survey in 2004 of its class of 94, 10 years on, revealed the great gulf between the notion of a firm career path being automatically laid out before someone with the cachet of having been to the Juilliard, and the reality of how hard graduates were generally having to struggle, and how many core and even non-musical skills they were needing to acquire the hard way. Entrepreneurship is a word one would scarcely have encountered within the walls of conservatoires as recently as 20 years ago. Now, it has largely shed its distasteful connotations, and along with leadership, features prominently and proudly on the websites and prospectuses of many front-rank conservatoires. But the traditional model of conservatoire training is robust and intrinsically resistant to change. The master-apprentice teaching paradigm, which lies at its heart, fashions students in the image of their teachers, and in turn forges their own teaching styles in ways that reach back in a kind of apostolic succession to the 19th century. Conservatoire leaders and administrators commonly find this self-regenerating core the hardest to reach when implementing necessary modernizing initiatives. The often outwardly impressive responses at an institutional level to a changing profession sometimes feel as if they are only skin deep when it comes to the daily routines of learning which continue behind the closed doors of the teachers' studios. And it is interesting to note how in areas of the world that have seen the most rapid rise recently in numbers of students passing through a conservatoire-style training, it is the traditional paradigm of the master-apprentice and the apostolic succession of skills transmission that still seems to predominate. What will be the future for the huge number of musicians currently graduating from institutions in countries such as China? Will the appetite for classical music there confound the more complicated and predominantly pessimistic view of the future for such music in Western culture? Or will these musicians and the institutions that produce them find themselves, as in so many areas, replicating in a few decades the trajectory that took as many centuries of European history to complete? If so, the greatest gift we can bequeath to our young musicians, assuming that they already come to us fired with talent and a passion for their art, is the capacity to adapt and to respond with creativity and imagination to unforeseen circumstances, to balance a healthy respect for tradition with a readiness to challenge any and all preconceptions, and all of this underpinned by a keen appetite for risk-taking. Musical talent and ability may always be core attributes looked for in conservatoire students, but to spend their years of learning simply basking in these will not only fail to prepare them for the reality that faces all but the most exceptional few after graduating. I would argue that the qualities I've just listed, as well as being tools for survival in the many futures of music, are precisely the ones that we have always cherished in many of our greatest musicians. I hope we may return to some of these thoughts in our roundtable discussion. But first, to prepare the ground in greater detail, I am delighted to have with me two distinguished colleagues, Gretchen Amussen from the Conservatoire de Paris and Professor Wang Yaohua of the Music Institute, Fujian Normal University, China, who will offer us their individual perspectives on how, in very practical ways, initiatives in their respective institutions are both reflecting and addressing the issues that are the topic of our session. First, we have a presentation from Professor Wang, who is going to speak about the transmission of traditional Chinese music in college music education.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As my spoken English is not very well and time is limited, I would like to invite Mr. Linzda to present the paper for me. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to present the paper for Professor Wang here. And the title is The Tradition of Transmission of Traditional Chinese Music in College Music Education. Today, due to globalized economy and instant multicultural communication, how to establish a unique college music program to cultivate outstanding musicians has become an important question for music institutes in China. In the past 20 years, the Music Institute of Fujian Normal University has explored ways to pass down the tradition of Chinese music. This is our brief report. Why should efforts be made to pass down the tradition of Chinese music? Generally, there are two reasons. First, traditional Chinese music has a time-honored history with excellent traditions and a profound heritage. However, traditional Chinese music is now challenged by the modern mindset that rejects anything old. It is therefore important to develop effective methods to pass down traditional Chinese music and make it the foundation of music cultures in the new era. Number two, passing down excellent traditional culture is one of the major functions of education. We believe that higher music education must help fulfill this function. We should compare teaching materials of folk music through intensive collection to classify features of traditional musical cultures. Through scientific research, academic forums, and scholarly writing, we should explore rules of practice in music education and establish a system with characteristics that reflects the profound influences of Chinese music on Chinese history. Number 2, what should be passed down? The author holds that the traditional Chinese musical performance art, the theoretical knowledge of traditional music, as well as the aesthetic values in traditional music, Chinese music should be passed down to help the students clarify their cultural identity. Number 1, traditional Chinese musical performance art refers to the performance of traditional Chinese vocal and instrumental music, skills, techniques, and the aesthetics of comprehensive performance art and cultural connotation are also part of this tradition. During its long history, traditional Chinese vocal and instrumental music and comprehensive performance arts, such as traditional operas, Chinese folk art forms, song and dance, etc., have developed in characteristic singing, performance techniques, and musical interpretation. And such techniques and interpretation can be mastered only by painstaking study and practice to achieve the essence of the music and to make further innovation. These techniques, for example, include 5 types of articulation, 4 tones, diction, acoustics, rhythms, and diminution methods of vocal performance, fingering, grace notes, and simplification or complication of instrumental performance, and variations on a single melody, ornamentations of simple notes, and improvisations techniques. Only when these cultural characteristics are understood and mastered by students can they inherit the essence of music and use it as the foundation to further develop and create new musical styles. Number 2, traditional Chinese music theories. Recent modern music education in China was generated at the beginning of the 20th century. Traditional Chinese music has been influenced by European music from the very beginning. And for a period, music institutes in China had basically been imitating European education systems in their course arrangement, teaching content, teaching materials, and teaching methods. And at the time, research on theories of traditional Chinese music was suppressed. Over the last 60 years, especially the last 30 years, the situation has improved to some extent, with the successful compilation of the following 4 collections: Chinese folk songs, Chinese folk art, Chinese traditional operas, and Chinese folk instrumental music. Great progress has been made on research on traditional Chinese music. Enthusiastic attention has been devoted to the curriculum development of traditional Chinese musicology, and a great number of theoretical research publications have emerged. My colleagues in the Music Institute of Fujian Normal University have joined hands with Chinese music scholars of the National Chinese Academies of Arts, China Conservatory, and Wuhan Conservatory to compile the series of research on traditional Chinese music, including Introduction to Traditional Chinese Music, Traditional Chinese Temperament, Traditional Chinese Musicology, Traditional Chinese Musical Structure, Traditional Chinese Music Scores, Ancient Chinese Musical Aesthetics, Chinese musical phonology, Chinese musical archaeology, etc. More works will be compiled and published in the series in near future. The series attempts to summarize the theoretical basis and principles of traditional Chinese music from every musical academic field, and is used as teaching materials for undergraduate, master, and doctoral students in the classroom to pass down the traditional Chinese music series. Meanwhile, continuing studies on traditional and modern Western classical music theories will help analyze the similarities and differences between traditional Chinese music and traditional music of other cultures, and better develop the curriculum of traditional Chinese musicology. Number 3, transmission of traditional Chinese musical aesthetics and values, and recognition of cultural identity. Music aesthetics and values are the most important parts of their cultural transmission. The characteristic musical cultures of each ethnic group are shaped by aesthetics and values developed over time. Our task is to have the students discover the aesthetics and understand the values of traditional Chinese music, teach them to appreciate and recognize traditional Chinese music from within, and make traditional Chinese music a passionate pursuit and lifestyle among young students. Moreover, ethnic cultural identities must be defined. The core of musical arts is human, because music is one of the humanities. Its foremost purpose is to guide the potential humanistic needs of each person, cultivate humanistic concerns, and establish gracious humanistic ideas and humanistic beliefs. During the transmission of traditional Chinese music, its essence should be deeply explored. More importantly, the students must gain the ability to use music to reflect introspectively on the meaning of life and to further develop individual cultural identities. Moreover, an open mind is necessary to correctly evaluate the equality of traditional Chinese music, Western music, and folk music all over the world. This means to have students to recognize Chinese cultural identities, to fully understand the rich and profound cultural connotations of traditional Chinese cultures, to honor traditional Chinese music, to assume their responsibility to develop and create traditional Chinese music, to appreciate and experience their generous musical culture's atmosphere, and to establish their devotion to the nation and traditional Chinese music. Number 3, how to transmit traditional Chinese music in higher music education. For example, the Music Institute of Fujian Normal University integrates 3 important elements: the curricular, extracurricular activities, and communities into overall program of cultural transmission. First, designing and arranging sufficient and appropriate courses in traditional Chinese music in the curriculum. Classroom teaching is a major method for cultural communication. Therefore, classroom teaching of music becomes a major method of transmitting traditional Chinese music. To elicit support from community, teachers and students incorporate their bicultural teaching approach. At Fujian Normal University, performance, art, and theoretical knowledge of traditional Chinese music are taught separately from those of Western classical music. As Chinese and foreign language are taught separately, both play important roles in education. Chinese and Western systems of knowledge are taught separately in the same types of courses. For example, Chinese musical history and masterpieces, and foreign musical history and masterpieces, Chinese instrument performance and foreign instrument performance, etc. But sometimes both traditional Chinese musical theories and European musical theories are mentioned in the same course, such as music theory and solfeggio. Or both Chinese and foreign music pieces are played and performed in the same course, such as piano and vocal music. The above-mentioned method is simply applied for undergraduates. As for master students, a two-pronged method is used. For example, in the course Form and Analysis of Music, both traditional Chinese music analysis and traditional Western music analysis are included in the course. As for doctoral students, a three-pronged method is used. The first is learning of the 8 books in the collection of traditional Chinese music. The second is learning of Western musical theories. And the last is reading books on modern Western musical idioms. Taught in such a bicultural or tricultural method, the traditional Chinese music is understood better. In the meantime, when the diversity of musical culture is comprehended and respected, through comparison, the features and rules of traditional Chinese music will be explored. Number 2, increasing the extracurricular activities to transmit traditional Chinese music, to provide platforms for students to practice their musical performance skills. Artistic practice is part of our teaching plan. Such practice occurs for 4 hours one afternoon every week in various types of interest groups. In such activities, traditional Chinese music or works based on traditional Chinese music is featured, and traditional Chinese music will be further understood by actual practice and performance. Meanwhile, in performance on other occasions, the proportion of traditional Chinese music is properly increased to promote transmission of it. Number 3, transmission of social and cultural traditions of folk activities. Education cannot be separated from its diverse cultural environment that helps to shape its development. Therefore, to transmit traditional Chinese music, special attention should be paid to organize the students to participate in folk activities, such as in the Shifan musical performance, a unique music genre in Fujian, in the Lanterns Festival in Fuzhou, in the line singing tradition, a special voice and instrumental ensemble popular in Quanzhou, and in the Beiguan practice in Quangang, and academic forums. By participating in these folk music activities, students will better comprehend traditional music. Fieldwork is also important and essential in the graduate studies. The students should be encouraged to research where traditional music is generated and disseminated, and select subjects to study by intensive investigations. The structure of their dissertation and thesis should be based on in-depth investigations and analysis and classification of their data. The actual study should be based on deeper fieldwork, more detailed primary data, and more thorough investigations of the traditional music in the culture. Read 10,000 books and walk 10,000 miles. The first part means learning the rich data and research outcomes of the earlier scholars, while the latter means investigating traditional music in the real world and getting acquainted with, and better understanding the traditional music so that the students can develop their personal appreciation of it. Tradition is a river that can be deepened and widened by the energetic streams that flow into it. We are determined to gain nurturing knowledge from tradition in the Music Institute of Fujian Normal University, to cultivate contributing musicians and music educators in the transmission and innovation of traditional Chinese music, to make the tradition even more brilliant and dynamic. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. That was very illuminating. And now Gretchen Amussen, who is not only Director of International Relations and External Affairs at the Conservatoire de Paris, but also one of our 2 vice presidents of the European Association of Conservatoires, will speak, and her title is Conservatoires to Innovatoire in Europe, Tomorrow's Musician.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here today to share reflections as to how conservatoires prepare musicians for tomorrow. What does it mean to be a musician today? And how does the musician define himself? How has this evolved from the traditional 19th century model? Are there inherent qualities and characteristics above and beyond specific competencies that each musician needs to succeed? Given these realities, how do conservatoires in turn modify, enlarge, or rethink the training model that is theirs? My paper will seek to integrate tendencies in European conservatoires over the last 10 to 15 years, as well as work done by the AEC's thematic working groups dedicated to the profession, Polyphonia 2004-2007 and 2007-2009. We know that there are no simple formulas for success, and that the ever-changing economic and cultural realities in which we find ourselves have a profound impact on the way in which we choose to respond to these complex questions. Studies demonstrate that for today's artist, it is exceedingly rare for a single activity to dominate their professional life and livelihood. This reality has been termed the portfolio career, for it is common for musicians to be engaged in several activities at once. Performing, be it in orchestras, smaller ensembles, or as soloists, teaching, improvising, managing a career, working with other musical traditions and art forms, running music festivals, developing projects designed to communicate with and attract new audiences, often with little or no access to culture, engaging in research related to his artistic practice, communicating using state-of-the-art multimedia, etc. The musician's identity is now at the crossroads between tradition, creation, pedagogy, and research. Beyond the cultural sphere, she is asked to be a full-fledged actor within the society at large. As musician-citizen, she is asked to imagine educational artistic projects in a host of venues where audiences have little, if no access to classical music, be they hospitals, prisons, schools, nursing homes, etc. As an orchestral musician, responsibilities often include conceiving programs for chamber music, developing educational outreach projects, which may involve classical works or improvisation to engage new audiences. Indeed, in many cases, arts funding is linked to the development of such innovative educational projects. Symphony orchestras across Europe, traditionally the single largest employer of instrumentalists, are, in many countries, being asked to merge, reduce their programming or size, and often no longer offer long-term stable contracts. Depending on the country in which he lives, the musician's orchestral work may be defined on a session-by-session basis, leaving him periods during which he needs to develop other activities. More and more, the musician is in fact asked to invent an artistic pathway, one which can integrate music from non-Western traditions and cultures, for example. So, beyond real musical talent and virtuosity, what qualities and competencies do we seek for our musicians and future professionals? Ideally, they will be open, curious, flexible, generous, engaged, imaginative, innovative, respectful, good networkers, communicative and able to collaborate, risk takers who are at home and knowledgeable about the evolutions of the national and international professional landscapes. By enabling musicians to invent an artistic career that corresponds to their own identity, we seek to train artists who are both happy and engaged. The musician is at once a performer, creator, pedagogue, researcher, at ease crossing cultural and artistic borders and collaborating in different styles and art forms. A citizen musician adept at reaching new disenfranchised audiences, including those with little access to culture. A skilled networker and communicator, conversant with multimedia, able to communicate both in virtual and live settings, be it with fellow artists and the profession, students, or the public at large. And an entrepreneur, capable of translating ideas into projects and projects into realities. In addition, she is flexible and at home in multiple languages and cultures, knowledgeable about the national and international cultural landscape, its actors, and issues related to artistic mobility, fully engaged and happy to be exploring the boundaries of the artistic life which she is creating, whilst ensuring that heritage be transmitted to future generations. You might say this would seem to be mission impossible. I just heard that. After all, we are asking these artists to continue to perfect an art form which in itself is highly demanding and time-consuming. How, in fact, do we find a balance in the training our conservatoires offer? How can we prepare musicians who can readily translate their artistic talents and skills into a meaningful artistic life? The Paris Conservatoire has grown from an institution which trained wind players for military bands during the French Revolution to one where principal subjects include instrumental and vocal music, including Baroque, classical, and the contemporary, alongside improvisation and jazz traditions, harmony, composition and conducting, musicology and analysis, pedagogy, acoustics and sound engineering, and contemporary and classical dance and dance notation. First and second cycles, corresponding to bachelor and master levels, are now completed by a third cycle focusing on artistic research. A sound grounding in theoretical subjects, a capacity to communicate using audio, visual, and written media, understanding of the working of the profession and its networks, linguistic skills, and above all, a capacity to conceive and realize artistic projects which move across disciplines and artistic fields, are all part of the skills now considered to be essential. International mobility involving exchanges, joint curricula, and performance projects enlarge perspectives and place musicians squarely in the greater world in which they are called to evolve. Above all, the Conservatoire now seeks to help each and every musician to reflect upon and develop an identity from which he or she can invent a meaningful, coherent artistic pathway. Beyond its traditional one-to-one lessons, courses, and seminars, the Conservatoire has initiated orientation days which focus on knowledge of artistic, scientific, and professional resources, sensitizing musicians to the need for physical and mental preparation and specific auditory risks they face, days of the profession, plenary sessions, and practical workshops designed to provide an understanding of the national and international cultural landscape, its tendencies and principal actors, to incite students to invent their professional pathways inspired by the examples of individuals who have taken a variety of career options. Conferences are provided on the master's level to deepen and further students' ability to develop coherent projects with a full understanding of the legal and economic complexities of the profession. The Innovatoire competition asks students to rethink the concert form by crossing musical and artistic borders. Prize winners are provided financial support and produced with full in-house expertise, audiovisual, communication, production, etc. International mobility, study abroad, joint research and performance projects. Performance and mediation projects, crossing artistic borders, in museums with dancers and actors, etc. Professional orchestral experience, opportunities to perform alongside principal performers in professional orchestras, an initiation to mediation, including experience with non-specialist, often disenfranchised populations, and much more. Across Europe, the questions raised here are nourishing new programs and approaches. Herewith, 3 examples. The Joint Master's Program for New Audiences and Innovative Practice, led by the Prince Claus Conservatoire in Groningen in the Netherlands, with partners in Iceland, Great Britain, and Sweden, is open to classical and jazz musicians alike and integrates a variety of artistic and social contexts. The program training in leading and guiding, performance and communication, entrepreneurship and action research offers specializations in collaborative practice, cross-sector projects, and ensemble work. All students participate in joint intensive workshops and spend at least 1 semester abroad. Teachers and students from the Norwegian Academy of Music working in a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon over the last 10 years have forged new roles for community educators, demonstrating thus the transformative role musicians can play in zones of conflict. Education and performance outreach at the Louvre, Orsay, and Pompidou museums have involved musicians and dancers from the Paris Conservatoire for over 5 years. Pedagogy students choose, research, and present works which are related to their future profession. Classical and jazz musicians perform and improvise alongside works of art which speak to them. At Pompidou, jazz musicians design their performances jointly with students from schools of art and design. At the Paris Conservatoire, the debate amongst teachers and pedagogical leaders as to how to best prepare tomorrow's musician continues to be a lively one. For these trends are complex and have profound consequences on the ways in which we integrate them. Without pretending to be exhaustive, we believe that in order to prepare our students for the musical futures that we predict for them, we, as Conservatoire, need to forge an institutional mission that is relevant, coherent, and adapted to professional realities. We need to act as artistic models and a resource for artists and the society at large. We can foster multiple forms of learning and practice, including lifelong learning skills. We need to encourage cross-cultural and cross-arts collaboration and develop innovative project-based learning approaches. We can provide opportunities for encounters with a variety of audiences and with professionals who are inventing the profession. We need to help students acquire linguistic and multimedia knowledge and skills. And finally, we need to engage partners and continuous dialogue with alumni and with the profession. Thank you.
thank you very much to both our speakers. We are moving now into a round-table discussion, which we hope will open out quite readily into a general discussion involving you all. To begin with, I should like to ask Hisham Sharaf from the Arab Academy of Music to make, in a way, a kind of response. I know Hisham is going to talk a little bit about the situation and circumstances in his own countries and relate that in various ways to what we have heard so far. I am very grateful to Hisham for agreeing to speak to us in English today. His English is very much better than he thinks it is. Hisham.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I want to talk about the historical background about when they established conservatories in the Arab country. In the beginning of 1930, the oldest conservatories established in Iraq and Egypt. The second step, conservatories established in Tunisia, Algeria, between 1940 to 1950, and after in Lebanon, Syria, Gulf, between 1940 to 1950, and after in Syria, I said in Lebanon, from 1960 to 1980. And the last conservatories is established in Gulf area beginning of 2000. The conservatories in Arab country, they teach traditional Arabic music. This is the first ID. And after they want to teach classical music, they said the Western music is as a classical music. The problem that when they teach traditional Arabic music, there is no method till now in some conservatories. They study music from teacher directly. The teacher who's not education musician, he's a professional musician, but is not educational. He don't study music in conservatories. But in the last 10 years, there is a method established in some conservatories, and this is very difficult to know because some teachers, they don't have guide to teach some student. But for classical music, there is a method in all the conservatories. Most of the conservatories now hosting the orchestra. There is now 7 orchestras in Arab country, in Iraq, Egypt, Tunisia, Lebanon, Syria, and in Oman. The problem, I think about some Arab countries that till now they don't have conservatories because something from their some people they think that from their religion that is not allowed to study music, and especially for women. And some women in Gulf area, if they want to study music, they go to Egypt or Iraq or Syria or Jordan to study music. And you can imagine how it's difficult to move from your country, and especially for women from Arab country to go to another country to study. I speak about the Arabic music. And about classical music, what the conservatory now, the goal of this conservatory that when they're hosting the orchestra, they invite between 10 to 20 musicians from Europe to play in the orchestra, and at the same time they are playing the orchestra and teach in the conservatory. And I think this is a very good idea because that time there is a culture exchange between the local musician and with the foreigner if they come from outside. This is the mean of the Arab conservatory.
Hisham, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I was thinking about how to launch this general roundtable discussion, and I must say I was very struck and very inspired by many of the examples we heard of in the session just before lunch on fair culture. And I know we have some colleagues here in the audience who made presentations there. And although this is a slightly complicated way maybe to launch this, I thought that given the overall theme of our World Forum, it might be important for us to do this because it opens out and I think deepens in some ways our sense of what are the responsibilities of conservatoires. In her opening presentation, Hanele Leto referred to 3 types of ethic. Do you remember that diagram? She talked about the virtue ethic, the responsibility ethic, and the consequential ethic. Now, it seems to me that conservatoires have perhaps been mainly concerned with the first, which, as she said, is concerned with self-expression and individual creative identity. Professor Wang's presentation reminded us of the responsibility ethic, the conservation of cultural traditions. But it seems to me that some of the most inspiring examples, such as those we heard this morning, relate to the consequential ethic, creativity as an instrument, and cultural policy and action as part of social and economic policies. Now, Gretchen's examples seemed to me to touch on these, but I should like to explore, partly in the panel, but also out in the room, how we might see conservatoires serving all these 3 ethical types, and perhaps in particular the third and last. And I asked Gretchen if she might be able to make an initial response to this. That's a hateful thing to do to anybody, isn't it? But Gretchen, do you have some initial thoughts on that? And then maybe perhaps we can open it out more widely. She'll never speak to me again.
You know, he did ask me this, but I realized that I completely put it in the back of my mind and I forgot that he was going to ask me. I think that this question is at the heart of what I was trying to address, and probably one can never say what one really wants to say as well or as intelligently as one would like. But I think that the most important thing we can do is to keep asking questions. I think that in the end, we will not have one simple answer, and there is no simple answer, and life is not a simple answer, and society is not a simple answer. So I would just say that I think for Conservatoire to keep saying, why are we here? What does it mean to be a musician? Why do we need musicians in society? And how do we play a role and take responsibility in that society in a way that has meaning? I guess that would be my simple answer, and I think that other people might have more to add to this.
Good. I can see some hands going up, so that's splendid. Do we have an extra microphone for... Yes, it's just coming. That's fine.
Thank you very much. My name is Diana Hobson, and I'm from Ghana. There are 2 ways I think we can add more to Conservatory for the musician for tomorrow. One is the making of traditional musical instruments, the making, the packaging, the marketing of it, the maintaining of it. If maybe conservatories can have a technical aspect, technical department that would investigate into the instruments, package it well, I believe it would really help, because with advancement, with new trends, and now with fusion music, it will be needed that we do the tools as well, so we can preserve. And the second point I want us to make is we need to really also go into e-learning. Yes. Now, with the new technologies, we need to start looking into it and see how we can put the whole classroom work online and see how we can move together with the new technologies coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think in particular, in response to that second point, I have seen some very interesting demonstrations quite recently of the quality that one can now achieve in distance learning. And I can see this as being a wonderful democratizing tool, because it can take the attentions of the finest teachers out to wherever there can be reception and communication electronically in these ways. And I think we're only just beginning to conceive of how that could revolutionize and, as I say, democratize the learning that goes on. I think there was a hand at the front, and then I saw one at the back as well. So at the front here, yes. Yes.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Maria Carmen Gil, and I'm the director of the Puerto Rico Conservatory of Music. It is music to my ears to hear these presentations, because this has been precisely the vision that we've been instituting in our institution, much despite resistance, which is one of my points. Resistance, top down, bottom up, all way, every way. Our institution, it's engaged, was formed as a traditional conservatory, much in the European style, and it has been part of my administration to change and broaden that scope to a more current institution of the 21st century. The inclusion of Puerto Rican music and teaching Puerto Rican music as part of the curriculum, the teaching of incorporating the cuatro, which is one of the national Puerto Rican instruments, as a degree area of emphasis, having an entrepreneurial center for music, leading initiatives such as the creation of the San Juan Arts District, the School Arts District, which is another initiative of the Conservatory, the launching of the Association of Latin American Conservatories and Music Schools, many initiatives that are very, and I'm not citing them to do the pedigree, but just to mention the diversity. One of the precise challenges that we've had is to how the school, the faculty, even board members can accept this new role of the conservatory, being that much of the minds are educated to teach as you were taught, and that the conservatory's role is a different one to this progressive vision. And I was just wondering how, well, for instance, institutions that have already been doing that, such as the Paris Conservatory has many initiatives. How do you work with your faculty, and how do you get the support from behind you, not just a standalone leadership kind of initiative, but the support that you need to engage in that vision, because you do need to transform the students and to transform the vision of those students, which I agree to 500%. That's the future. You need, when you close the door, the faculty is there, alone, one-to-one, and the tradition goes on. So how have you dealt with that situation in your own schools?
I didn't talk about this just now, but it is a real problem. And it is, I just think that you have to be patient and say that time is Timo, did you want to say something? Yeah. The time is important, because at first people are doubtful, they're dubious. They say, no, this is not a good idea. They say, maybe we try a pilot project, we do a little project. And then several things happen. One is that we see the students' minds are changing. And it's not just the teachers. I think we have to also accept that somehow the students are coming to the table with different qualities. The profession is changing, the economic situation is changing, and we also are part of a Bologna process in Europe, which is I'm not going to talk about the Bologna process, but this is also a process which has been part of the whole thought process for these teachers. I agree that many teachers stay in their classroom and they still teach the same aria or the same piece in the same way, but there are people who are changing, and you just need a few. And in the end, I think, that's just what I would say, but I think it's an ongoing battle.
Yes, I very much agree with that, and I think it's, yes, find your champions, and they will help in that. So the questioner at the back, and then Timo afterwards, yeah.
Yes, it's working?
Yeah.
I'm Stéphane Gros-Claude from Interregional Platform in France, grouping of cultural development agencies. I think, maybe I won't have the right words, but you will, I apologize. I think one of the most problem is, I agree with Gretchen when she says we have to think about the sense of the things, but I think it's not earlier. It should be earlier, yes. Not only in the high conservatories, but the very beginning of music lessons, of artists' lessons, not to teach them only to be a professional musician, but a body that can be teacher, that can be anywhere of profession concerning arts and music, of course.
Yes.
And I see that you heard about LMD law, and in France it's very difficult to change it because there are many institutions, and we began to concert with the professional federations, and that's the real problem. How can institutions of each level, of each profession, can discuss together? They don't do that for the moment.
Yes.
That's the real problem, I think.
Thank you. I'm sure that's right. Timo, and then there's a lady here who has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When we are thinking about how the universities should react for the changes in society, I think this is, for all of the universities, a great challenge. And I'm thinking about this renewing of the training programs. It's kind of a circle. So first of all, to be able to renew your system, you have to have an idea about what is happening in a surrounding world. So we talk about how to get the dialogue. And it has to be continuous, ongoing dialogue. So the second step, once you have this information, is the question, who is going to analyze this information? Which means there's changes, what it means for us, what kind of new skills and knowledges we should have to offer for our students in order to be able to work as a professional musician or teacher whatsoever. And once there's an idea about what are the new needs, then somebody should be able to formulate this inside the training programs. And finally, the fourth is about when the students will graduate and go into their professions, to keep contact as alumni and get the feedback, what is the system as a whole. But my question for you as university people, do you know any university in the world who has kind of structured model for this, and there's some money to pay for the persons to take care of the whole system? Because if you lack one of these steps, it basically means that it's not working.
I think it depends where you sit in the world. I say this because I work in France, but I come from the United States, and the economic systems that are related to education are very different if you're sitting in Europe and if you're sitting, for example, in North America. And there are some considerations in North America which will be that you have to be somehow knowing what the market is. I hate that word, but that's the word. You have to know your market, so you have to study it, and so that's your first point. And you have to be able to analyze it, so that's something that people do, because they're looking for students who will be able to act within that market, and so they will formulate something, and they stay in contact with their alumni maybe not for the good reasons that we think are good reasons, but I see my university in the United States writes me every single week, hoping that maybe I will make $1 million and give them $1 million. So there are different reasons why people do this. And so I think that the political situations in some of our countries is such that we won't ask these questions because it's not useful in the political or economic context of our countries. But there are places where it happens. I don't know, I'd be interested to hear what other people have to say.
Maybe if I can also make a response, because what you've just described so beautifully, including its cyclical aspect, is something which, as a model, has been very clearly presented as part of what's known as the tuning process. This is a process in Europe driven from the individual disciplines, including music, to try and cope with the whole implications of the Bologna process and take things forward in a way that's sensible and meaningful for the different subjects. And there is something called the tuning dynamic quality enhancement cycle, and it's exactly what you're just saying. However, your question was, do I know of any institution that is really practicing that? And I'm afraid my answer, perhaps a little cynically, is no. And then perhaps a more idealistically, not yet. I think there was a lady here with a question. And then...
Yeah. My name is Dr. Suvarnalata Rao. I come from India. I'm very happy to see that there's a lot of introspection going on about what are the, for the 20th century, what are the challenges, and educational institutions like conservatoires, which are sort of maybe prerogative of the Western world. In our part of the world, we don't have these conservatory methods. But nonetheless, I'm very happy that as an educational institution, you are taking cognizance of what you must do to mold these new products to take on the challenges of the 20th century, 21st century. But my question is mainly for two friends over here who talked about, the Chinese situation, traditional music, Chinese music, Professor Wang, and also a friend from Arab world, Professor Hisham, Sharaf. I have a small background to make here. I happen to teach for more than 15 years Indian music at the conservatory in the Netherlands. That's a Rotterdam Conservatory, where we have the world music program. And we have had really tough time fitting Indian traditional music into the system of conservatoire. Unless we just gave into the Western kind of methods and of teaching as well as evaluating. So, we had a tough time, maybe, but over the decade, we sort of worked at it, and today we can say that we have some kind of model whereby we think that we are not compromising on the traditional way of teaching and disseminating the knowledge, yet fit into the conservatory kind of model. So I'd like to know from the friends here as to whether they face similar challenges coming from the traditional music, which is trying to be fitted in the Western model of conservatory.
Thank you very much. Well, this is very much a question for our colleagues. Hisham, are you ready to speak first?
Yes.
Thank you.
I think the Indian music and Arabic music, they have some similarity, yes. I tell you, the most important that you mix the two methods, that the classical music, how they teach the music, this like theory and solfege, and the same how the teacher directly without background, how he teach that like oud player, he play directly with the student, and then he play some passage, and they must mix these two if you want your music is be more professionality, but not like classical music. I said no, that you can learn them how they play the music, how can he correct his mistake when he play this passage. Two schools you must mix it between. We do it in Jordan now and in Iraq also. Who finish there is an instrument in Iraq is named Jose. He finished violin in United States or in Russia, and he returned to teach how he can teach this traditional instrument, but he take some melody from Iraq to teach this because the most important, you must take some melody from your traditional music to teach this instrument. It's not you take some melody from Europe and you want to play it in your traditional instrument.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And please bear with us. We'll do a little bit of translation and.
这个我们中国的音乐学院基本上在上个世纪初的时候都是帮欧洲的这种音乐学院的模式。
上个世纪初。In the beginnings of last century, that's in the system in China that's imitating from the European systems.
但是呢，后来发现啊。完全照搬欧洲音乐模式，对我们中国的这个传统继承不利。
But later we found that it's not good for us to imitate the wholly from the European system, especially for the transmission of the Chinese folk music and traditional music.
你就以发音。就是它的旋律进行来说，我们中国是跟声调语言相联系的。
So as for the melodies of the pronunciation, maybe just in China, maybe it's mainly connected with the up ones.
所以呢，我们的一般一个音里面还有音高、力度、音色的变化。
So just for one symbol, it includes the strength and the color and different things included in this. Just only for one symbol.
你比方说，我们阴、阳、上、去，它就是这么阴、阳、上、去，就这么有一个。它本身有一个音调的变化。
So it's quite have a different level for one pitch, a different level, yeah.
那欧洲的语言呢，它是属于重音的语言 ，traditional， 大大大大。那我们的阴阳上去。那它是讲究这个高低的变化，它那个是欧洲的是以大大大大，就是节奏很鲜明，重音。
So it's quite different from the European ones. That the European ones maybe they have a very clear melody or clear rhythms. Yeah, that's what da da and it's quite different from Chinese ones. Yeah.
所以呢，我们要在这个找出我们自己的规律，然后根据我们的来建立起我们自己的一套系统。
So we just have to find our own rules and then build our own systems.
所以呢，欧洲的，比方说拉小提琴或者钢琴，它就没有滑音，没有的。阴阳上去，它都没有这种花音。
So as for piano and play violin in European ones, maybe they don't have this kind of pitch. So just like the different level pitch.
那所以呢，我们唱歌的时候呢。好一朵茉莉花，好一朵茉莉花，满园花开，想也想不过它。你们唱起来了，好一朵茉莉花。
So Professor Wang just give two examples of difference. There are very clear difference between the Chinese songs, Jasmine. It's a very, very traditional, famous songs, Jasmine, and it's at a different pitch between these two kinds of singing. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's not just an answer, but a demonstration. Thank you so much. Thank you. We had another question here. Thank you.
Is this on? Yes? So Mike, just jumping back to the entrepreneurial point, my name's Peter Gregson, I'm from the UK. I'm not going to sing anything, sorry. So just quickly to preface it, I was at music college very, very recently, and I left on following grounds that I was doing a lot of contemporary music, a lot of modern work, and the general consensus I found with music colleges in the UK certainly was if you can't grade it, it's largely not worth doing. And so my interest with what you were saying is how do you propose to grade innovation when precedent hasn't been set? So, you know, a new piece of music has not objectively been proved to be good. So, you know, the performance of artwork written yesterday is quite hard to assess against one of, you know, Shostakovich or Britten or Bach. And also just a little point of you know, terminology that is bandied around a lot, certainly in British music colleges, and apologies if anyone has rewritten this since 2 years ago, but the current guidelines still state that you can do a 20th century piece of music. So, I mean, the smug git that I am, I did the Elgar Cello Concerto because actually, you know, but you know, seriously, the question remains of assessing innovation. If it's going to be, you know, it kept going on every other slide, that, you know, entrepreneurialism and all these other kind of things, all these other isms, how do we measure that?
I think that's a very good and a very important question, and it's all wrapped up in a culture where we are, because of accountability, required more and more to make these kinds of measurements.
And also, basically, students default to the easiest thing that they can get the best grade for.
Absolutely. And I think more generally even, there's a tendency, students learn the rules of the game. They know the kind of performance style that will earn a good, safe mark, rather than perhaps risk-taking. That's one of the reasons why I had that on the slide. Just one little aside, the institution in the UK where I worked until recently said a work by a living composer, which is a way of getting around you. Although that can still mean a work that goes back an awfully long time. But somebody
can I just respond?
Please.
I just want to say that the session that preceded this was about evaluating how we deal with social change, which is about as a complex question as the one you've just asked. But I think one answer is to bring in people who are in the profession, bring in professionals, and have panels in which these people read the projects and discuss the project, listen to the projects and say, this is something that's taking me on a journey, because that's what you're asking for somebody to do. A musician, a work of art is something that takes you on a journey. So, of course, we all define that differently, but.
There was
a few issues just right here, but normally we are always talking about the issues of music education, and we are considering the challenges and the difficulties that exist in Europe or in North America. I think it's time also to talk about the challenges and difficulties of music education in developing countries. That's one issue. And today, during the conference in the previous sessions, there's been also a lot of talk and discussion about the importance of music or diversity in music and culture, and the importance of promoting native or local musical traditions. And at the same time, there have been some hesitation about promoting Western music in other countries, like a kind of new colonialism on issues that we raised today. I think that while we are appreciating all these issues, we should also talk more about the challenges of music education in developing countries, in Arab world, in India, Pakistan, and also how the conservators, the experience that you have got, can assist us to meet those challenges. Our colleague from Iraq, Mr. Sharaf was just talking about the difficulties that musicians are wonderful musicians in the Arab world, that they are not music educators. And there's not a system and methods for teaching traditional music. I think that the same problem we have got in Afghanistan, where the majority of local musicians are illiterate. Generally illiterate. I'm not talking about illiterate in music education, but illiterate, how they can teach and make sure that they're transmitting the local traditions to younger generation. I think that's now time that we join our forces together also to assist this developing countries, Arab world, Afghanistan, maybe even India. What do you respect that Indians got a wonderful system of music, especially in North India and even in Karnataka, but still, I've got a wonderful teacher from India who is teaching in our institute in Kabul, but still they are lacking. I can say based on this person that we are lacking pedagogical skills in this country. We need, or at least I need in Afghanistan, given also the experience how the music was suffering there, we need the expertise to sit together with our musicians and to assist us develop pedagogical resources and teaching and learning materials which would make the life of students much easier. So let's talk about the challenges not only in the context of European or North American, but also consider the challenges of music education in other parts of the world.
Thank you, thank you. There was a gentleman at the back who, yes, please.
I just want to say, first of all, that was the most fantastic demonstration of passionate teaching, yes, which is sadly lacking quite often in our world. I think there is an inherent problem. I spent 25 years of my life as a professional musician, working in orchestras in London and then in Scotland. And we have to stop, and I'm not going to make a crass generalization, that would be insulting to the people in the room, but we have to stop referring to the orchestra. We have to stop referring to the orchestral musician and start talking about the musician. Start talking about great music performed at the highest standards. And in Scotland, we have a fantastic tradition of traditional music. And the reason that we are getting huge numbers of successful graduates coming out of what is now the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland is because the traditional music course is enshrined in that institution. It's not been added as a token that we better do something with traditional music. Wouter's looking along the line, we better do something with jazz. The most successful and credible and contemporary courses that are successful, and we all know where they are, and I'm not going to start listing names, are the ones that have taken jazz, that have taken traditional and acoustic music as seriously as 50 years ago orchestral music was at that time rightly taken. And I think that's a key issue for the conservatoire sector.
We have, I would say, time for 2 more questions. I'd like to make sure it's people that haven't yet. Yes, please, would you like to?
Thank you very much. I'm Josephine Mogunye from University of Benin, Nigeria. I want to thank God and IMC for the opportunity to be in this session because I've learned so much. And you see, this situation is that the world of music is here, present. This is the world of music. The whole world has been compressed into one room. And hearing the presentations, I thought I would not preempt my presentation for tomorrow, but I hope you will all be here to help me in seeking solutions to the questions that will arise from the presentation. But what I want to say is, I hope there's a journal that will contain the outcome of this conference so that we can have the materials as a reference point, a source material. I hope there is. Okay. And I think also we should, from here, it would appear to me that almost everybody here, we all have similar problems. Even I thought you had all the answers in the Western world, and I was coming to copy what you're doing or see how I can adapt, But we all have common problem or common problems. Can we, in the nearest future, begin to think of how to solve this? If we don't have an established methodology for the teaching of music, in all over the world, why can't we sit down and begin to design one? So there's a standard that we can all key into, bearing our various differences, But at least there's some framework through which we can disseminate information in musicology. I agree with you. A lot of music teachers, university lecturers, have no educational background. They are specialists in their own areas. But how do you teach it? Becomes the problem. Can we, in IMC, in a future forum, a near forum, deal with that as a task for IMC? Because this is the only body, this is the biggest body of music. And this is, it behoves on us to be responsible for such a future, a realistic future for music, world music.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very inspiring. If I can just quickly respond, and then we will take a last question. I absolutely agree. I think that to work together is the answer here. I would like, this is kind of putting in a little plug here for the European Association of Conservatoires, who a few years ago actually did do a project called Mundus Musicalis, which sought to try to begin to make a global mapping, to look beyond, therefore, just the European frontiers, to find the common grounds that we have and the common issues. But it is probably high time for that process to be renewed and taken forward. So this is very timely. But if you visit the website of the AEC, you will find still all of the material produced by that project and indeed other projects that is beginning to try to map these things, at least as a basis then from which that discussion can go forward. But thank you so much. That was inspirational. And our last question, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Joe Tabla, music producer from Uganda. Speaking from the perspective of developing countries, I think there is a need to try and bridge the gap between the academia and the actual music practitioners, because giving an example from my country, that is the biggest challenge we are having, that our university, when you ask the output, there are so many students that come out of the university studying music, dance and everything, but when you look at how successful and what and how they carry on the music, actually the numbers are very, very, very low compared to the people, all these guys who start training by themselves and they are rocking the world. And I think there's a very big need to bridge that gap. Maybe we can get it through such forums. And another thing is try to encourage, I think it's almost connected, is trying to encourage music training beyond the traditional classroom methods or modes. Yeah, that's my contribution.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, here. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been almost precisely on time. We had to start a quarter of an hour late. We have finished just over a quarter hour late. I'm sure there are many more opinions, questions, good ideas. What's been lovely to me is the way that the discussion has started to flow and develop over the last half hour or so. I would like to thank you for your participation, for your very good ideas, and most of all, I would like to thank my colleagues who have shared the platform with me and given of their experiences and their wisdom. Thank you all very much indeed.